Recently,
Mm,
I released a video on the topic of Robby Robinson and my reaction and review of his latest documentary. And
mm,
I lent you the I lent you the video, so you had a chance to see it as well, just to
mm,
compare your thoughts with mine. And did you want to
mm.
give us your reaction to what you thought of the documentary? Was I being too harsh?
No, a little bit, but some of it was a bit cringeworthy, and I'm just wondering the funding behind it. I think it was the fanboy of Robbie. That's Tim. What was Tim's surname again? I've forgotten.
Taylor.
Uh, Tim Taylor. Yeah, very obviously a very wealthy person and financially free, as he touted himself. But some of it was fly on the wall stuff, which I enjoyed. And, but their message, this what is it? The 6 point blueprint to success was fairly generalized, I suppose, but
There was nothing too
still,
revelatory there. It was
no.
basically drink water, get your sleep in, eat good quality food. I mean, there's nothing, you know,
Mm.
that's going to be too earth shattering or life changing at the end of it.
No, it wasn't, but it was quite good the way they sort of talked about each one. I suppose for someone that's just getting into the sport, it would really be quite good because
But the thing I
yeah,
wanted to know or get your opinions of was some people always accuse me of being a little bit too harsh on the bodybuilders in these reviews. And
mm,
I always try to obviously be completely honest because I don't want to just, bullshit and
mm,
blow smoke up
mm,
the guys'
mm,
asses, especially with Generation Iron, because it just seems
mm,
like sometimes they're cashing in on the
yeah,
fame of the past bodybuilders. But I always have
mm,
this mantra of attack the message and never the man. And
mm,
in this case, the controversy surrounding Robbie was his war service claims, especially him,
mm.
with
Yeah,
even
that's
those
right.
pictures of him standing in front of the Vietnam Veterans War Memorial of
Mm,
the names of all the dead soldiers that were killed in
that's
battle.
right.
And I
Yep.
sort of think that juxtaposition alone was a little bit
Mm,
disrespectful in a way. And the thing is,
mm,
he regardless of whether Weeder made up that story or not, he obviously corroborated it. As Dorian said, he retold the story many
mm,
times at many seminars around the
mm,
world because other
yep,
people also chipped in that had been at former seminars and said that
yep,
they had also heard Robbie count that exact same story, and I
mm,
had heard it before. So it was something that he was never proactive about clearing up until
mm,
this information age, which a lot of these old guys probably never predicted that their lies would one day become
that's right.
exposed.
Come back and haunt him.
And stolen valor is probably one of the shittiest things that you can do in terms
Mm,
of saying that you were in a particular, war situation and that never happened because he wasn't a draft dodger, but he did dodge, the service that he was called up for.
yeah, I mean, he that particular, I think he was, didn't he? It was somebody that in battle, didn't he sort of have to hide under a body or something? It was really
Well, that was
quite a
this
bizarre
bullshit
story.
story, it was
Yeah,
completely invented where his platoon was ambushed by the VC and,
that's right.
he was the sole survivor because he hid under the body and then
That's right. Yeah,
they went around bayoneting all the bodies and he has a scar on his leg
yeah.
but there is no fucking scar that I've ever seen,
Mm,
and it's completely contrived, and the thing is, as Martin Luther sort of said, "We'll judge a man not by the color of his skin, but the content of his character." And Robbie
yeah.
all these days always wants to roll out the racism claims,
Mm,
yet none of the other black bodybuilders from the 60s
mm,
onwards cry any kind of we to racism. In fact, like
mm,
Joe was completely generous. I mean, Joe was a bastard of a businessman to be sure, but
mm,
he was an equal opportunity exploiter at the end of the day. He fucked over everybody for a dollar if he could.
mm,
But, Robbie thinks that he was owed something just because by the virtue of the fact that he had a great physique. And those are just the little things that I can't get over. And I am a huge fan of Robbie and always have
yeah.
been of his physique.
Mm,
I, paid Robbie a huge amount of money back in like 2013 to go and train with him. We trained arms together. I took
yeah,
him out
that's
for
pretty
lunch
cool.
afterwards and he told me all the stories and everything. And,
Mm,
I've always been a great fan, but when people bullshit, it needs to be
mm,
called out, I'm afraid, especially
mm,
when they're putting it in a documentary to again perpetuate that bullshit.
mm. Yeah, well, he definitely skirted that issue. There was a Dorian Yates interview as well. Remember, he skirted it there, and it was really sort of, it was a bit dodgy in the Blueprint for Success doco. But look, at the end of the day, Robbie did get lots of opportunities. He was on lots of magazine covers. I mean, let's face it, he was very popular. And then, of course, in the end, we know what happened in 1994 when Joe Weider got him down from that mountain and put him in the Masters Olympia. And there was that shock first place victory over Lou Ferrigno, where it looked like it was the Masters Olympia was made for Lou Ferrigno to win, and then
Of
Robbie's
course.
gone and won it. So he's definitely been given opportunities, and it's funny. Even Sean Ray made a comment, didn't he, that there's nothing more racist than a 77-year-old black man. He said apparently, which I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
I think older men in general can get a little bit, not necessarily if you're black, but I think there is some bitterness there, so that came through. But then it was tempered fairly well with Tim, who I think Tim liked the sound of his own voice a bit. So
Yeah, well, it
that's
was a bit of a self-promotional vehicle for him, and that's why I also
it
didn't
was,
like his
wasn't it? Yeah,
presence because it was distracting and it detracted from the overall message of the documentary, which was supposed to be about Robbie Robinson. It wasn't about Robbie Robinson and Tim Taylor.
that's
It
right.
was, I wanted to see more of Robbie's history, and there was, I've read the Black Prince, his autobiography. There's a ton of
Mm.
stories over there that they could have just
Oh yeah,
included and turned it into
mm.
a visual narrative, but I
Yep.
think it kind of failed in that regards. And like I said, it was fucking expensive for $20. I mean,
I know
that's in this day and age when
that
economy,
is expensive.
especially for someone like myself, it's every penny counts. But, at the end of the day, I do appreciate those documentaries being released. I'm glad somebody at least is doing them and celebrating the old names and messages.
Mm,
But, there needs to be a little bit more quality control at the end of the day.
mm. Yeah, look,
Uh,
it was
yeah.
quite interesting when he the little they touched on it when he went to Europe, didn't he? And he was a security guard for the ladies of the night. That
Well,
could have
what's a,
been,
what's a, what's a person that manages the ladies of the night security, AKA that's a pimp.
yeah. They didn't.
So you're
They
basically pimping.
no, that's right. I know. That's it. And they skirted that very quickly too. It's just as an interesting little snippet. Boy, geez, they could have delved into that more, and we might have heard some sordid details. But yeah, it was definitely Tim just kept jumping in and having his little spiel and sort of
Yeah,
attention
yeah.
seeking. But other than that, there were some good little snippets, and your own montage video of that was fantastic. People need to check it out. So if people don't want to watch the whole thing, just watch Sean's uh, little summary video. It was brilliant, and it was quite funny too in part. So worth
Yeah,
having a
and
look at.
regardless of what I thought or anybody else sort of thinks of it, I do always encourage people to go and just
Mm,
support the
mm.
production of these videos because if there's nothing incoming for these companies that do take the time, and you can see the production values on these videos are really high class.
Oh,
It's
they
quite
are.
expensive for them
Yeah,
to make.
for sure.
And if no
It is
one
quality.
supports it monetarily, then companies won't do that. And then we'll lose a whole lot of our history in
Mm,
terms of future productions. So, because these guys will eventually die as well, and then their stories will be lost to time.
mm.
But I think we can probably move off that topic now because it's chewing up a lot of our hour. But I think
That's all right.
the next great topic to discuss would be the Hunter Labrada and Hani Rombard
Mm,
discussion that was released a little while back.
mm,
And I'm a huge fan of Hunter because I'm a huge fan of his father. His father was one of the first to inspire me into bodybuilding. But what did you
mm.
think of the quality of this interview?
I can see why he'd be a good coach, and I can see why he'd get very close to his athletes. And it seemed that he connected very well with Hunter in the interview. So it was very easy to watch, easy to listen to, and there were some really good snippets too.
Yeah, well,
That,
one of those snippets that really stood out to us, especially, was
mm,
the Hunter saying that the reason for his physique improvements was based especially on the elimination of, especially of his liquid meals, but
yep.
also the highly processed breakfast cereals and whatever else
Mm,
shit food that he was throwing in to make the consumption of all these calories easier. And as we
mm,
both know, there's this big like plague or pestilence of bodybuilders around the globe
mm, mm,
that as soon as the workout's done, that's out with the box of cereal and the liter of milk. And you and I have always sort of thought, like, what the fuck are they doing?
right.
But,
So
it's monkey
inflammatory.
see, monkey do. And now we have a generation of bodybuilders with fucked up stomachs like Hunters
Yep,
and, piss poor conditioning of their physiques. And they're wondering, oh, what's the cause of this?
that's right. Yeah, no, look, it was music to my ears when he said he took out the shitty carbs post training. I mean, some of those cereals and things that people are having, Rice Krispies and you name it, uh, and you get away with it in your early 20s, kind of. but then all of a sudden you've got all this, poor gut health, and your joints are inflamed and you just feel terrible. Anxiety's through the roof. Yeah. I mean, no wonder. I mean,
Yeah, well, I wanted to get onto the anxiety topic a little bit because it's like the fashionable linking of anxiety with PEDs topic at the moment that's being bantered around the internet. But I just wanted to
mm,
speak on my own experiences because the only time that I've ever had coaching from somebody is from that resident idiot, Jordan Peters. Remember
mm.
back, almost 10 years ago when I
Yeah, I
adopted
remember.
him as a coach because he was the kind of the big name at the moment. And he seemed very intelligent and a guy that spoke very well at the time. So he resonated with me. But, I gave him 12 weeks at quite an expensive rate, and he wrecked both my physique, my health, and my wallet in those 12 weeks. And I just sort of thought it was a miracle how rapid the decline was in all metrics of my time with him. And with him, it was the box of cereal after the workout. And I could only kind of attribute the crappy processed carbs that he put me on. That was like the red flag that I
Mm.
never really wanted to do after that. Even a blind man could see that that was wrong.
I remember I remember seeing you. We were doing some posing in my garage, and you'd been having 5,000 calories a day. And it's the most inflamed I've ever seen you. You were very fluid retained, and I've never seen you waist that big. I don't think you were that fat. You just looked super watery. And it was,
I had huge bags under my eyes and I
yeah,
felt
you did.
miserable and depressed. And I
Yeah.
sort of thought, oh, I never get depression. I never feel like
No,
terrible. But this is why
that's
I
not,
also respond to Wild Carnivore. But that approach with the box of cereal and all the processed he was putting me on bagels and everything else. It was just
ah,
ridiculous.
so inflammatory. I mean, since then you've got all that graininess back, and so you've never gone back to that sort of look. So that's good.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's effortless now. And like, at 50, I sort of think this is sometimes maybe my best shape and my best strength and my best overall health as well. But another thing I really liked about Hunter's message in the Haney Rombaden interview was that his training approach has shifted away from the more high intensity, strict progressive overload
That's
and
right.
focusing more on the form, the mind muscle connection, and the range of motion. And he no longer uses the training logbook
Mm,
that was giving him anxiety in a way before that he always had to beat.
mm.
And I know that, a lot of the top guys sort of say once they've achieved a top physique that, oh, I could have just achieved this with pump and fluff workouts and high volume and not needed to worry about training really heavy. But they forget that that's usually the foundation builder. And
That's right.
Hunter can afford now to back off the strict heavy overload and focus on these other things because the body's built. He just has to refine it now.
Yeah, that's true. And I really like. I mean, this falls into one of our viewers, Faz Lifts, who talks about progression criteria instead of progression overload. And we're seeing a lot of the pros train like this now. And Nick Walker's a great example where they're just trying to get their mind into the muscle connection. But if you go back many years ago, someone like Lee Haney would say it that um, a true champion in bodybuilding was one that could really get their mind into the muscle and really get that muscle connection with every single movement that they did. And it was that was sort of a way, that was something that almost all champions needed to have, was that ability to really work the muscle rather than just throwing the weight around. And I'm sure it was Lee Haney that said that. But we're now seeing all these years later, all these pros, changing their training, and I guess they're trying to avoid, snapping a tendon too, which we've seen a lot of that
Yeah,
in
and it's
the
quite a
last 20
nebulous
years.
concept or statement to make when the top pro level guys say you need to get your mind into your muscle because it's not a concept I think that you can explicitly teach to say the
No,
beginner or intermediate guys. It's something that comes with years of intuitive
that's
experience.
right.
It's almost like the artistic approach to the sport as opposed
Mm,
to there's nothing you can science about putting your mind into the muscle. But
No,
again, I sort of
no.
think that once you reach that level, it becomes that connection to the weight where your
Mm,
body's mind's auto regulation has to kick in and you need
Yep,
to be able to feel that weight as opposed to
that's right.
just stacking on more and more weight. That's probably going to lead you to a bad place at the end of the day in terms of injuries, which is why I think Dorian's career, once he had that mass, he was so dominant, he could have really backed off everything
Oh yeah.
and still been as dominant for many, many, many more years.
Because I mean, his form was fantastic. I mean, he definitely got his own mind into the muscle. It's the way that he trained. So he didn't. Yeah, well, yeah, I think he realizes now that he could have lifted lesser weight, but It's a bit of a shame, isn't it?
Yeah. Another topic I really liked that they discussed was that the classic physique compared to men's physique probably should have bigger purses, but Hunter also believed that open bodybuilding should still get the bigger purses.
Mm,
And I was kind of the mind that
mm.
I know you probably think differently, but I think it's almost time that they fucked off the men's physique division and the 212 because I just don't really see the need or the purpose of it anymore. What's
Mm,
your thoughts? I know that you like Ryan Terry and that, but
mm.
the names in those divisions particularly don't even seem to have any relevance in the conversation much anymore. No channels discuss them. So what do you think?
Yeah.
I
Well,
think the money can just be
yeah,
redistributed.
yeah, I know. I think there's definitely a case, Sean, for the 212 to go because we're seeing these 212 athletes, marvelous 212 athletes in recent years with Hardy and uh, Derek and now John Dewett's looking mind-boggling. They're winning. Even Sean Clarita, they're winning pro shows. So I think then, and this was discussed on the Sean Ray um, interview just recently, where even Lee Priest, they're saying that it's a division now that probably isn't necessary because back in the day, even some of the smaller guys were winning, um, and it's happening again. So I think that division could go, even though I do like some of the athletes, but those athletes could shake up the open. But men's physique, I don't know. There's something about that. I couldn't stand it at first with those baggy board shorts, but now that they've got those tighter board shorts, and I am a big fan of Ryan Terry, and I do like that look. So it's definitely mainstream for the young guys. They still look like bodybuilders, so it's not like they look like they just stepped out of a nightclub or off the beach. So I still kind of like the men's
Maybe they
physique.
can amalgamate them with classic physique because their physiques are almost looking classic at the moment. They're probably, getting very close to what the classic physique
It
weight
is.
caps are anyway. And, at the end of the day, that would then allow them to open up their posing, which they can't really do in the classic physique, and get rid of the ridiculous shorts altogether because they're covering an important body part, which is the legs.
Mm,
So it's just a redundant body. It's just a redundant class now, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is super close to classic physique, and Hunter and Harney were actually talking about the fact that if, given that they're so close together, it would be better to have the classic physique more towards the middle. So if you're going to have the three divisions, you've got your open, you've got classic, a little bit more muscular, maybe a little bit bigger, more towards the middle, and then men's physique over to the right, if you like. So at the moment, I would agree with you. They are too close together, men's physique and classic, for sure.
Another of the hot button topics that Hunter and Haney discussed is this currently, I don't know, saturated topic of anxiety linked to
Mm.
PEDs.
Yep.
And I don't know, they kind of drew some connections, but I think my opinion is people are ignoring the obvious elephant in the room when it comes to this topic because, with social media and just the stresses of the modern day with all this we don't give our minds a second's rest from our phones and the crappy diets that everyone's eating. And this
Yep.
anxiety pandemic is multifactorial.
Mm.
And I don't
For
think
sure.
it's just the PEDs. Probably the PEDs are not helping as well. But you never heard about this before, about this pronounced connection between PEDs and anxiety, whether it was the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s, or early
Mm.
2010s. It's only a very recent conversation that's coming up, predicated on the bigger named influencers, wanting to
Mm.
sort of relate these topics like Mike Israel. But,
Mm.
what's your thoughts? Because Hunter and that,
Mm.
they talked a lot about the needless suffering that goes on in bodybuilding and the role that the mind plays. And it doesn't need to be about this romanticizing of misery and pain. But what's your thoughts?
Well, there have been quite a few bodybuilders in recent times talk about the fact that any sort of mental issue you have can be heightened with PDs. That's what they're saying. But like you say, there's other aspects. It's multifactorial. Definitely, social media is an issue. I see it with the students I teach at school. Social media is the number one cause of the increased anxiety and depression that I've witnessed in the
That's right.
last
And they're not
15
on
to 20
PEDs.
years. No, they're not. That's exactly right, Sean. So there's that. But I think the anabolics might play a little bit of a part. But yeah, and Hunter actually said that he did a social media detox, and he does a few other things as well to increase his mindfulness. So he does apparently he does 10 minutes every morning in the sun, puts his feet on the ground. So he grounds himself. That's helped him a lot. He's thrown away the logbook, social media, out the window. And well, for a young man, what a fantastic outlook that is. What a fantastic way to problem solve. Brilliant. More guys should do. I tell you, should do that. Sergio Oliver Jr. needs to do that because Jingo's social media is wrecking him. And I don't know that that's gear. I think that's social media that's caused his anxiety. Has to be. He just gets so worked up. So it's a fascinating topic, and I can link it with my own experience to teaching. But that phone and all those and all the different social media platforms too that you feel that you've got to chime in on all the time. I mean,
Yeah, I've definitely backed up on it. Like I try to just keep my attention on my YouTube channel. I might go on Instagram maybe like once a day at the end of the day, but I don't
yeah,
doom scroll anymore. And, one of the quotes that I really liked what Hunter brought up is he said that your body's going to go where your mind is. If your mind's in a dark, shitty
yeah, that's right.
hellhole of cave all day long, your body's not going to be at its best. So you're not hardcore if you aren't suffering. You got to be
That's
miserable,
right.
or you're not working hard enough. It's ultimately going to detract from the quality of your physique at the end of the day and just make this whole bodybuilding enterprise needlessly miserable when it should be a compliment and a joy to your life and a privilege to be able to have the health to stand on stage and compete at that level.
Look, those are great comments, and I've got to say that the best looks I ever had on stage was when I actually enjoyed my prep. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
hard. It was hard, but I wasn't suffering. I wasn't on my deathbed. When I was on my deathbed, that was when I bulked up in the off season and had to kill myself with cardio and had an aching spine for the last 4 weeks and couldn't get out of the seat. But I never looked that good. I looked a lot better later on when I stayed leaner in the off season, did a more of a tempered approach. But no, you don't. I mean, there is a limit to this suffering business, and so Hunter is looking very, very good at the moment. I
Mm.
saw some video just yesterday, and for the Italian Pro that he's coming up for. So he's had the best prep he's ever had. He's in a great position, great mental state. His legs haven't fallen away, so he's really thanking his coach Ben uh, a lot, in terms of maintaining his leg size because he's got some of the best legs in bodybuilding, best legs and arms, that's for sure. Hunter's just crazy, really, just what he's been able to achieve there, and that's probably linked to his dad's genetics. But yeah, just a few other things. His waistline was a bit of an issue, but then that's hopefully going to look better with less inflammation and improving his gut health. So I think he's going to look good at. I want to see him win the Italian Pro because he's going to be battling for a top 5 spot at the Mr. Olympia.
Yeah, I think he's a shoe-in for that win. But do you think
Yeah,
the common criticism leveled at Hunter is that he gets a better deal a lot of the time because he's riding on the name of his dad, of Hunter Labrada? Do you think that that's even a factor in terms of the look-in that he gets, or do you think that's exaggerated?
well, I didn't think so in the first Olympia he did, where he came 4th and he beat Nick Walker, which I know that I just couldn't. I was a bit gobsmacked how he actually got 4th. I would have had him 7th or 8th. His TAM was running. He didn't pose that well, and he didn't look that good either. Right. So I thought maybe he's been given a bit of a gift there due to dad, But then after that, his placings dropped, and he got beaten by some newcomers like Andrew Jacked and so on. So I don't think there's anything now, but I questioned it with his first Olympia when he came 4th. I thought, wow, that was a bit of a gift there. That's just been my humble opinion.
Well, speaking of shitty diets and mental health issues, I thought that this week's Mike Israel watch, and like like the Dorian videos, Mike can almost become a regular feature of our muscle media watch simply because this guy was saying that he pumps out 6 videos a day with his and then
Really?
this has this huge queue of social media videos to release. So, how could he not come up in the conversation each week? But one of his videos that he released a few weeks ago was quite pertinent, I thought. And he spoke about the benefits of taking a month off and training once a year. And by doing so, that could lead to significant muscle growth and performance improvements when you return. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about
Mm.
that whole topic and maybe we can recap it.
Yes, it's definitely worth recapping for the viewers. Probably not too many people would have seen it. And it's something that I would like to do a lot more often, but I just can't for the life of me justify 4 weeks off the gym. I did it many, many years ago when I was a young man. I was getting a bit injured and I was overtrained. And I think I took 3 weeks off and I nearly went stir crazy. But when I went back into the gym, some of the things that Mike talked about definitely occurred. So that was interesting. But never since have I taken any more than probably, I might have had 2 weeks off once, just maybe a week off here and there. But my training, I suppose I can justify it because my training is, I train 3 days a week. I'm not in the gym for very long, 40 or 50 minutes, sort of the HIT sort of thing. So, I mean, I get sore, but I, the way I've sort of set it up with my split, I give myself lots of recovery. So I don't feel like I'm overreaching as much as what Mike alluded to. Mike sort of said that this month off is definitely the case. If you're overreaching, the month off is going to be wonderful with so many,
Yeah.
so many
Well,
benefits.
like you're alluding to there, context matters and the experience and age and where they are in the life cycle of being a bodybuilder matters, but just alluding to some of the benefits as well that Mike was talking about. Number one, he
Mm,
talked about the psychological rejuvenation, where many people sort of say that the gym is their mental health mediator. I sort of think that if the gym is your mental health outlet, well, that's good, but maybe you need to
mm,
actually consult a mental health
mm.
specialist because the gym shouldn't be, complete outlet for that. The
No,
joint to connective tissue healing, that is an obvious benefit. You just feel like you're reborn when you have significant time out of the gym. The systemic recovery, you talked about the hormonal balance in the nervous system just recorrects and recalibrates itself. The muscle resensitization to growth. They always talked about before about how you should take resensitization phases because you get the repeated bout effects where your body becomes acclimated to the stimulus of training and it's just not as productive after a while. And I agree that it's so hard to do in practice since the gym is most people's touchstone, not only for mental health, but sometimes like their only social outlet. And it's also like the backbone for structure in their lives. But you fucking can't argue or deny the benefits of taking protracted time off because even the top caliber guys, throughout the history of the sport from Arnold, Ronnie, Kevin, Sean
mm,
Ray, I could rattle off a similar, very long list of champions throughout time that have all had a long time off after their competitions or
mm,
whenever they needed to.
I know. And it worked for them beautifully. But yeah, I think the word that was mentioned and thrown around, and we throw it around a lot, is cortisol. At the end of the day, high intensity training, elevates cortisol. And if you elevate cortisol for a period of time, that's going to start to muck around with you, the hormones that you want to be online, like your testosterone and so on. So it's not a surprise that taking a month off obviously lowers cortisol, allows the hormones that you want to come to the fore. You're going to start to feel better. And then, funny that you start to heal up. But I like that. I like what he says. He says a month clears away the deep shit like nothing else in terms of joint connective tissue. And it's deep inside the joint that you're starting to get and connective tissue that you're starting to get some healing. So not just removing some of the inflammation and fluid around the joint, but then it goes even further than that. And that's what Mike was talking about, and that's what made me think, geez, maybe I do need a week off, but I don't know.
Yeah. And he also made some really good points about the actual strategy that you can do if you are going to do a strategic month off. And he outlaid it like how to
Mm,
kind of, approach training and approach your diet, approach your PDs and supplementation. But, I sort of think that there's always going to be those blocks in regular life because we're not professionals by any means and we're not doing this for money. But I think like during a particularly stressful time or when life is just burning you out, hitting refresh by doing something completely different to the gym. You could
mm,
go and do a month of yoga or a month of social dancing or a month of a different sport that's completely different to the gym.
mm,
And I think it's also going to give you another, you know, arrow to your quiver, but just open you up to a world of possibilities that you might not see because you're so married to the gym. And we all know the fucking gym is not a faithful mistress. No, she's like a temperamental bitch who takes more than she gives after a while. And I always find that the longer the marriage of the gym, the greater the toll that's taken. So
mm.
it's sometimes it's like a toxic partner. You need a month or a weekend off sometimes
Yeah, right.
just to be able to recalibrate your own
Mm.
personal self and, sometimes. So I can't
Yeah,
recommend it enough.
yeah, look, I think there's a lot to it. I think I've sort of self-managed in that, in recent, probably the last 2 years, I'm very happy with the 2-day training week as long as I do an upper and lower body workout. But I make sure those workouts are bloody hard, and then I'm okay with that. But it just gives me a little bit of extra rest, and so I just find I'm not getting burnt out. So, but I remember for years, I had to go in every day. I had a 5-day split, and yeah, but then I was definitely getting overtrained.
Yeah, a lot of people just don't understand the nuance of the dance of bodybuilding, that it's always going to be a case of probably 2 or 3 steps forward and 1 step back.
That's
If you're
right.
not taking the 1 step back, you
Mm,
then obviously or oftentimes cannot progress forward. And it's
mm,
that time where you're away from the noise of the gym or the obligation of having to go every day or eat the 6 meals a day and take the supplements, take all the gas and live the life of a bodybuilder, which is demanding of the 24/7, 365 days that we
yep,
throw at it,
yep.
then you're never going to be able to clear away the noise to get a proper picture of where you're at. And you're going to lose strength. You're going to lose muscle. You're going to feel weird coming back.
Mm,
But the good thing is, it's like riding a bike and it comes back
mm.
very fucking quickly.
Well, Mike says it comes back better than ever. He says, well,
Absolutely.
when you first get back into the gym, you get great pumps just from your warm up. And I do recall that from the 3 weeks that I had off many, many years ago. I remember just getting outrageous pump when I came back. I was a lot weaker, but I thought, wow, this is interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of good points in it, and it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah, for sure. The next topic that we wanted to talk about is something that's quite near and dear, and it was a very hard kind of topic to decide on. But that's the most iconic photos in the history of bodybuilding. And I think thanks to the absence of magazines, particularly the exposure to professional photographers, we now have a quantity versus quality problem with the amount of
Yep.
photos that are coming out. Because social media has obviously opened people up, the ubiquity of cameras, everyone can take a picture at any time. But the problem is that we're not seeing any more iconic or quality shots come through with bodybuilding anymore. Nothing that we're going to print out and put on our walls anymore.
Mm.
And, you know, there's filters. I sort of call it a filters versus filters issue because
Mm.
back in the day, we had the filters of the magazines and the gatekeepers who
Mm.
decided what the best images were, and they had a great eye for bodybuilding. But we have filters versus filters in the sense that people are now using filters in terms of photo manipulation, Photoshop and fucking whatever else to distort their photos. So that when we see
Mm.
them on in stage or on competition days, they don't even look anything alike or the same. And I know they used to manipulate photos back in the day as well to an extent, but we're just not seeing,
Mm.
the same
Nothing.
quality. We want
No,
to we want to present our own photos as
yeah.
well.
Oh,
What's
nothing
your
like
what's
what.
your topic?
Oh, yeah, nothing like the filters now, though. I mean, the technology's huge. I mean, it was just different lighting and whatever else, and maybe just sharpening the image back then. But no, now, I mean, Chris Aceto says it best. You never pay any attention to Instagram pics leading into a show. They mean absolutely nothing. So yeah, but anyway, this is a good one for sure. And I managed to find a few classic photos that sort of appealed to me over the years. And I think we both agreed on this one, didn't we? The one with Lee Haney, Lee Haney's front double from back in the 80s. Wow.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's
If I
just,
was to pick my favorite Lee Haney picture, I'd probably pick the one of him standing over the sewer with all the mist coming out of it, where he's with the jeans.
yeah, that is
But
good
you
too.
can't deny the amazing, stature of that front double biceps.
Yeah, just the vacuum. And, he was really, he was the original mass with class, wasn't he? I mean, they said that about Lee Labrada, but Lee Haney was big. But, you can't dispute the fact that he had a great shape, and it was really accentuated, and you could really see it in his front double. Even though he had those short biceps or mid attached, it didn't seem to be a problem with the way he hit the pose. And his quads were good. He had good legs. So it was a fantastic photo, that one.
Yeah, when it comes to Haney, and I sent you a other bunch of pictures as well because people are hyping up this Andrew Jack to be the next,
Mm.
big thing. But when I see the pictures of the old guys that are juxtaposed against Andrew Jacked, I still think that someone like Haney still beats him into the ground. He doesn't have the size, obviously, but the flow and the proportions are everything still to me. How
Oh,
about this
yeah.
next picture of Sergio Oliva? Why did
Oh,
you choose this one?
well, just it was his famous victory pose, but once again, this highlighted, Sergio Oliver Senior's, insane proportions. I believe he was only about 5'7". He had that 28-inch chest, 28-inch waist, 56-inch chest, and 28-inch thighs, which for back then in the late 60s they were amazing proportions, and you wouldn't disbelieve it. His arms must have been 20 plus, 21 or thereabouts, but it really just looked fantastic there. And talk about V taper. How about that for a V taper? That's the very
He was
definition.
also the pioneer of the breakfast cereal and Coca-Cola diet, wasn't he? Because apparently he never skimped when it came to his dieting choices, but he still always bought this great condition.
Yeah, just a man with just sensational genetics. Honestly, he must have loved the sport though, but and obviously paid his dues in the gym to the iron game. But that was a very iconic photo that a lot of bodybuilders have tried to copy over the years. Some have done it quite well, even his own
Yeah, what do
son.
you think about it when his son does it?
Okay, but his son has got a much bigger waist, and so you just
Yeah, I
don't
don't
get
think
that V
Sergio Jr.
taper.
can pull this. I don't think Sergio Jr. Pulls this pose off at all. I think one of the only bodybuilders that I ever saw has pulled it off really well is Lee Priest.
Absolutely. When Lee Priest did that, Sean, in the 1997 Mr. Olympia, in his routine, Lee Priest did that to Superman music. He did that at the
Pulled
end.
the fucking house down.
You just to the words out of my mouth. The crowd went absolutely ballistic when he hit that pose, and that's something that's worth, I was having a bit of a look at again at some point, but yeah, it was pretty close to Dorian's routine in '97. Lee Priest, it might have been just
Yeah,
after Dorian.
I don't think he proposed to Superman in that particular one. It was the electronic
Oh,
version of the Carmina Burana one that was very
was it?
popular at the time because I'm a big
Okay,
kind of
yeah.
Lee Priest fan when it comes to his
Mhm.
because that blew me away when I first saw that in '97. And
Yeah.
he also did like the Tom Platz quad wiggle, and then
Yes, he did.
and yeah, no guys really do that quad wiggle anymore in the posing routines. I've noticed.
Yeah, he was a cartoon character, Lee Priest. But yeah, so he's been pretty close to pulling off the victory pose. And of course, Frank Zane himself, you got to remember he did it. And with his wafer thin waist, he looked pretty good in that pose. Although he brought his the backs of his palms closer together when Sir Frank did it. But still, Frank looked good in that
Mhm.
pose, that's for sure. But and this one here, talk about a fanboy of Tom Platz. Well, I was a massive fan of this guy, and some of these photos on the beach with that natural sunlight, with the sun overhead, they're some of the best photos you can take of yourself. When you're in
I think it
shape.
was
Go
that one
out,
was taken in Australia. This
could have
particular
been,
photo.
yeah, it could have been. But oh, geez, he looks good there. I mean, Platz was just a marvel of muscle, the quads, but he really had a great upper body too. I mean, okay, his clavicles were a little bit narrow, but not that bad. And before he tore his bicep, he was complete. He even had his lats inserted down near his hips. He just had all the muscle bellies. Yeah, muscle bellies. That's the phrase I'm looking for. He had that in droves and trained super hard. But he had that gold, that sort of his moniker, the Golden Eagle, with that hair and those teeth. He looked like a California boy, and he liked his Corvette. Is it not the new Corvette? It was the old Corvette, and he'd have
Yeah,
some photos next to
Stingrays.
that.
Yeah, he loved the old
Yeah,
Stingray. I read the
but
Tom Platt documentary. Well, actually, it was an audio recently where Tom narrates the whole thing, which is quite an interesting listen because a lot of it's just off the cuff, and I don't think he's reading from a script or anything. But he
mm,
mentioned that when he was becoming particularly wealthy and financially, living large, and he was getting a lot of popularity in the magazines and muscle media, and even beyond in
mm,
recognized for maybe film roles, etc. Arnold Schwarzenegger sent Tom a picture of so the picture was Arnold carrying a cardboard cutout of Tom Platz across his
mm,
yard with no
mm.
caption or no explanation. But Tom interpreted it as being Arnold basically sort of saying to him, don't forget who carried and got you here, and
Oh,
don't get above your station in life because I'm still the number one fucking dog on this block.
typical of Arnold. Yeah, can't stand the
Mm.
limelight. Can't stand losing the limelight. That's for sure. But Tom Platz definitely stole the limelight for a lot of people around the world, including myself. But yeah, great photo. I've got one on my wall, actually. Another one on the beach where he's doing a side chest. It's from a cover of Muscle Mag. He's doing a side chest on the beach, and I had to get that on my wall. So I've got some of the pros on my wall just as I look ahead here, and Tom's there. Yeah, it's a great photo, that one. But this one,
Number
of
4.
course, Labrada. This is where, if you like, Frank Zane meets Muhammad Makawi with more muscle. It's all of that. It's posing perfection. It's physique perfection. And this is mass with class, as he was coined. But by geez, look at that there. And just the spirit fingers. I call them spirit fingers when you pose like that, like they do in women's figure and so on. But when the men do it, not too many men can do it with the fingers like that. But when the shorter men can sometimes. If you've got long arms, it doesn't work. But by geez, they just look sensational there. And just, like I say, good looking guy, good smile, but zero
Articulate,
articulate, no weak body parts. None. Nothing
intelligent, an
missing.
engineer by trade. Like you said, good looking, full head of hair, not a flaw in the body. This was the guy that I always wanted to be in terms of my eventual look when it came to bodybuilding. Of course, I didn't measure up anything even close to it. But when I saw in the 1988 Olympia or something, when he stepped on stage at a similar height at 176 pounds, that was so aspirational for somebody
Oh
like
yeah.
myself, because I sort of thought, hey, I could step on stage at 176 pounds too. Of course, when the the weight caps came through when I actually competed in bodybuilding, remember I couldn't compete in classic physique at the time because they wanted me to be 148 pounds relative to my height, and I
Oh,
couldn't get into the 148 pounds. And I sort of thought, what kind of fucking Auschwitz concentration camp victim can get their weight down to 148 pounds for a fucking bodybuilding show? I had to lose like 30 or 40 pounds just to get down to 154.
No, I'm glad they tweaked those weights. It's ridiculous. That's what I was talking
Terrible.
about before. They could even just raise those that weight cap even more, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, good points, Sean. But isn't this an example of a classic physique? Seriously,
Yep. It's more
classic.
classic than the current classic physique guys.
Yeah, well, I would agree. But
And he hung with
it's
the big dogs. He hung with
yeah.
Haney. He beat a lot of other bigger guys. And people sort of say the bigger guy will always win over the shorter guy.
No,
But,
no,
he
no.
proved that, class, and back then when they used to judge symmetry, proportions, and posing, they don't
Yep,
anymore.
I know.
But that's just why he was able to edge out a lot of those other guys.
Yes, they ruthlessly took away that symmetry round. They took that out just to speed up the shows, and that's very dodgy that was. But don't you think in Mila Sarsev's words, hashtag bodybuilding. This is bodybuilding.
Yeah, well, when like
Applies to
Milos
this
uses
photo.
that hashtag bodybuilding these days,
Mm.
I don't know whether he's trying to be ironic or whether he's serious, but it's almost like hashtag not bodybuilding. And
Yeah,
where you can always hashtag bodybuilding these old photos, notice that none of us have used iconic photos of any bodybuilders from our selections from this day and age, or in the last, say, 20 years for that matter.
mm. Okay. So there's so much you can talk about with these pictures. That's why they're so classic, aren't they? They're such iconic photos. There's stories behind it and stories about the era at the time
Yeah, yeah.
that you can allude to. But yeah, no, it's a good one.
Actually, the photographers as well, because,
Yeah,
they had their own stories to tell. You listen to an interview with, Kevin Horton, Artie, or back in the day, Artie Zeller,
Chris
or,
Lund, Pat
Chris
Bennell.
Lunt. They got great stories.
Oh yeah, they will have, and they were talk about artistes. They were, weren't they? They were brilliant. Those
Yeah.
photographers.
That's it. And, not any dickhead with a cam and a set of, filters and Photoshop can take a timeless bodybuilding shot. I think that's the
Mm.
moral of the story of these photos that we're showing. Anyway, your
True.
last pick. Oh, fuck. I thought you were just going to have 5 picks of Dorian in your choices here, mate. But you saved the best for last, as always.
Well, this was the one that we
Socks and
saw in the
socks.
the one we saw in the magazines that changed the face of the sport. Everyone like you and I that picked it up in the newsagent and saw that was the first photo you looked at. That's the one that was the jaw dropper, and it was like all of his competitors when they saw it realized it was second place at best for them, and it really was a
Remember
game
the day
changer.
we're picking up that magazine in the news
Mm.
agency. It's clear as a
So
bell. I call it
So do
the
I.
bodybuilding JFK moment. You knew where you were
Oh,
when you first saw those magazine photos.
absolutely. And definitely the case for me. And I bought that thing, and now I've got that. As I've mentioned before in the previous show, I've got that. I've got the giant poster of that picture sitting directly above me, and it's signed by the man himself, and that's in my office. So that is a rip snorter. That one, yeah. And I don't care
Yeah,
what anyone says. He still he still had great symmetry. I know that people go on about his waist, but that was later on. His waist was
he
pretty
was
well in check
downright
there.
fucking aesthetic back then in 92, 93.
Honestly, he had everything, and I know it went a bit. It went sort of south afterwards with insulin and so on, which he admits that he probably shouldn't have taken. But no, everything was sensational there. So it's a good one. What about yours, Sean?
Yeah, and it was a hard debate, kind of not including one of my favorite Dorian picks in my own lineup, but I knew that you were going to have me covered in terms of Dorian. But just to quickly run through mine, Lee Priest was a huge inspiration, obviously being in Aussie, but again, similar kind of height. And, before he turned into his own version of a mass monster, as a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old, God, he had such a aesthetic, young, beautiful physique that again was attainable and aspirational back in the day. There's so many great Lee Priest picks, but I think two that I definitely had on my wall back in the day was the one with the, I think like that was almost just like a bit of an impromptu pose. It wasn't even so much planned, but I think maybe Artie Zeller, but the Superman logo, and of course the one with Tom,
Mm.
uh,
But don't
that
forget, Sean,
horseshoe tricep.
don't forget about Lee Priest, that Jade Cutler himself, when he first saw Lee Priest, was mind blown. Lee Priest was
Yeah,
a
because I think
cartoon
Lee Priest
character.
is probably about 20, 21 there.
Yeah. So even the Jade Cutler himself saw the man coming. Yeah, he was very. And so these are great photos. That one with Tom, oh, I love it. The added,
Yeah.
just that tenacity and the aggro in the training. I love it. Yeah.
Tilly Pastel. I
Mm.
know it's not a stunning photo, but it's a stage photo, but it just shows the absolute perfection of what bodybuilding once was, the art, the majesty, the stature. Even though he was only a short guy, he probably didn't receive the placings that he deserved. But, like even in the classic physique lineups these days, I don't see too many physiques that resemble something like that.
When you showed me this photo, I thought, yeah, Thierry Pastel, like I'll never forget him. But once again, back in the day at 5'2", the taller men were sort of winning a little bit more back then. There were some shorter men that were making some inroads, but they were more like 5'5", 5'6". He was a little bit short, but by geez, talk about muscle bellies and could he pose?
Just
I
the
mean,
flow, the
oh,
symmetry.
flow.
It just shows you
Great.
also how deep the lineups were, that this kind of physique wasn't, at the top of the echelon that was getting financially rewarded with and recognized and validated at the end of the day.
But one thing I will say
Um,
about go on there, sorry.
yeah, yeah.
No, just one thing with that. When you've got small joints and big muscle bellies like Flex Wheeler and Terry Pastel, it looks sensational. And Terry's a classic example of someone that had tiny joints, tiny knee joints, wrists, and that's what you get. Fantastic.
He's almost got that Serge Nubret, not the height, but the flow going
Mm.
on the physique as well.
Yeah, that's right, with
And the
legs.
larger. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This photo always kind of spoke to me when I first started out because, people like Larry Scott were still alive. I think probably I think Freddie Ortiz is still around. But, back in the 60s, these guys made something out of nothing. They were the original pioneers. They didn't have all the bullshit science or anything available to them except maybe a little bit of D-bol there on the side. But, you got guys taking a fuckload more than a little bit of D-bol these days, and none of them look like this. And to me, they just look like comic book cartoon characters come to life. And again, it just presented such aspirational looks to a young guy like myself getting into the sport. And the fact that they're wearing clothes, but still having these outrageous physiques, it was just so motivating to look at a pic like that.
That picture tells 1,000 words. Can you imagine, like people at the beach, because the sport was a bit of a minority then. You can imagine people at the beach just turning heads. That people would just be gobsmacked looking at those physiques, and they'd be pointing. But now, if you look like that at the beach now, you get abused. People go, "Ah, look at that guy, roids." They just write
Yeah,
you off
yeah, that's
straight
it.
away. But back then, I've got to tell you, and I know because my dad competed in the late 50s, and he had a great physique, and people, would look at you and just be, they'd revere those, that sort of physique back then. And I don't know, in 1965, when Larry Scott went on stage, apparently the audience went quiet. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. So it's that picture is a ripper and, highlights what happened with
Just the most
bodybuilding.
fun and innocent time of bodybuilding as well.
It,
They were
it
really,
was, but bodybuilding people started to think, wow, these guys are something, yeah,
yeah, absolutely. They look like they're from a different planet and,
yeah,
from a different time as well. It's just a time that I don't think we'll ever get back, but that's how bodybuilding is gone. So that's what it
yeah,
is.
great pick.
Again, the iconic pick of Flex Wheeler, not too much needs to be said, but he was another pivotal impact on the sport at the time because you had this guy that was not a huge character by any means and almost like the counterpoint of how bodybuilding became. And as Sean Ray described it in the interview we discussed later, him and Dorian were basically the archetypes for the crossroads of bodybuilding in 93. And I don't think I could ever see, even as good as he was, a Flex Wheeler beating Dorian in 93 because Dorian was, if you're going to speak about bodybuilding, he was arguably so much more superior, but fucking physique of Flexes, it's
I
just,
know.
if you were
Well,
to, again, show somebody that doesn't know what bodybuilding is, the picture of a
mm,
perfect human,
I know.
fuck, that would definitely qualify.
It's a great picture, and he's hitting the post perfectly. But look at the condition of the man. Flex would really struggle to bring those glutes and hammies in. You could see the glutes and hammies there. That's rare gold condition for Flex Wheeler. But again, this highlights what I said about Terry Pastel, those tiny joints. Flex had tiny joints with outrageous muscle bellies, could pose, and that's what you get. Just brilliant, and timeless picture, but a great choice.
Yeah. And we can't not include, the godfather of bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and trying to
The one, the
select my
only.
favorite Arnold pick was like trying to decide who my favorite child was. There's just so many to select from. But I think back when I first started bodybuilding, this first pick on the left, the black and white one, just shows the
Mm,
level of thickness and the natural, quote unquote, natural muscularity of the guy.
mm, mm.
You could take all the steroids you want again with all the science that's available today. We never see physiques that look like this.
Just
I mean,
the pecs and arms. The pecs and arms just look magnificent, don't they?
but yeah, and just the artistic expression of the King of the Hill
Yeah.
with his Hail Hitler Nazi pose and the sun, rays there peeking through. I just sort of think we don't get art like this in photos anymore with bodybuilding.
No.
Not only is the art of bodybuilding being lost, but the literal representation of that art in terms of the visuals has also been lost.
Oh yeah, there's a couple of great photos there, and that's a ripper. Once again, those photos outside in natural sunlight can be some of the best pictures. They really are, and
Yeah.
that looks terrific. Oh yeah.
And again, I thought these two just were a great juxtaposition that I've
Mm,
organized there because I couldn't decide which one I wanted to use, but that was a classic pose of Steve Reeves,
mm,
who just married that real mainstream appeal of a good looking
mm,
guy on a perfect body with Tom Platz, who took the sport to a different level in terms of the development of his legs that have
mm,
probably never been seen since. But the funny thing about it is it was kind of like what bodybuilding was and what it became and what it would eventually become. But both guys were never looked down upon at the time like they
no,
are now.
no.
So, they're both celebrated for the different packages that they brought to bodybuilding.
Look, really, all the photos that you've put up, definitely conversation pieces, aren't they? Steve Reeves was just a yeah, magnificent specimen, and so was Platz, but in a completely different way, in an alien way. Yep.
Yeah. But when speaking of photos, I wanted to get your opinion on one of those dramatic moments in the bodybuilding industry that was Dave Palumbo squaring off against Marc Pocketliner and the whole furor over Dave's
Okay.
new girlfriend. I think Marc Pocketliner was criticizing Armand Adibi or Beatty or whatever his name is, but since Dave
Maybe,
split up with his missus, he's become Dave's new girlfriend. And Mark was basically criticizing the fact that Armand had completely AI generated or something or painted pictures of his physique for commercial purposes that didn't look anything like the physique that he presented on stage.
Mm,
Now, just one thing about Armand, like he used to be on the Leo show, but there's something up with that cat. The way he kind of jerks around and plays with his hat and he's kind of grabbing at his face all the time suggests that there's some recreational influences going on in this guy's life. And I don't think he's all fucking there for starters, but Dave was singing his praises like the second coming of Jesus, and the whole thing was embarrassing. But what did you think about?
Yeah, well, it was, and even Marc Lobliner himself, what do you call him, Pocketliner? I love your takes on the names. It's very funny. But yeah, Marc Lobliner, I've always struggled with him. But then, yeah, Dave got really butthurt when he attacked Armand's photos. But then looking at the photos, Armand tried to say that these were taken by a modeling photographer for his website. But if you look at what happened, I mean, because the whole furor started after Armand did a show. He did the heavyweight at some regional show, the heavyweight division. And when you looked at his physique, you could see he was pretty lean and all that. He had a great big gap between his abs. He looked like he'd had a hernia there. His legs weren't all that huge, although pretty good shape. But then all of a sudden, you see on his website these photos, and he's got the best set of abs you've ever seen in your life. And he's got these balloon-like sweeps in his quads. And you could see that it had been heavily doctored. And
Not to
so,
mention the 15-inch cock that the guy had digitally
that's
enhanced.
right.
That Dave
Oh,
seemed to be
boy.
talking over it at the mouth about, and
No.
sort of, he was putting down Pocketliner's cock. Dave could only go on about cocks, which kind of shows you, what the
No.
trend has been doing to Dave over the years. But
But don't you think, Sean, it was like supremely childish?
it was so childish,
Seriously.
but I also sort of thought, is this just orchestrated? Because both these guys are on the decline in
Yeah,
terms of their popularity, the numbers.
Could be.
They're becoming increasingly irrelevant in the industry.
Mm.
I'm still fucking amazed how Dave Palumbo, who is the fucking biggest snake of the industry, I can't ever believe that we used to give this guy any kind of dedication of time and eyeballs or even a listening ear. But the guy is a fucking embarrassment. And the fact that he's still alive when so many fucking good people have died, it shows that the fucking devil protects their own at the end of the day in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I still quite enjoy watching his Heavy Muscle Radio show, and I do like Chris Aceto.
Someday.
Yeah, and I do like Chris Aceto's candor as well. So I don't mind some of that sort of stuff. But when Dave gets butt hurt, and he likes to say that he's got thick skin. Well, I don't know about that, because when he gets butt hurt, he goes off and he'll do these
He
rants.
goes on about friends. Look, he still goes on these days about Steve Blackman. Like,
Oh, yeah,
fucking,
no.
get over it, you fucking sensitive prick.
You-
That
you've
was
got it,
20,
you've got it.
10 years ago.
You have to move on. You have to move on from stuff. And him and John Romano, the way they keep carrying on about Steve, but at the end of the day, Steve did a lot for the industry. He really did. Steve Blackman with his magazine, which I subscribed to. I loved Muscular Development. It was a fantastic magazine, and then that's gone now, obviously. And so is his whole platform. And so is
Yeah.
Ron Harris's job, for that matter. But Ron
Yeah, well,
Harris is
Dave
making a
Palumbo needs
comeback.
to, follow suit and go the way of the dinosaurs, because, he's had his time. He sort of still pits himself as being this, extremely intelligent, on the cusp of getting his medical doctor license or whatever, and he never could fulfill that. He could never become a professional bodybuilder, which was his one and only goal in life. So now these days, he's become the next best thing, which is a supplement sales scammer and selling snakes on the side. So it's like a snake selling snakes. You couldn't make this up if you were writing the best fiction. I don't want to spend a heap of time on the topic because we are losing our time for the hour.
Yep.
But
That was
I just sort of
interesting,
thought
wasn't it?
that, yeah, interesting. It was if they orchestrated it, then I can understand. But otherwise, like you said, childish and embarrassing. But anyway, who have you got for the top 5 of this Mr. Olympia? Because we're almost 8 weeks out, and it'll be honest before we know your top 5.
Well, I'm glad you asked. I couldn't help but have a think about this. I've been following all these guys for the last year or so leading in. But in 5th place, I'll get straight into it. I've got a feeling that Samson, even though Samson's improving and all the rest of it, I've seen some footage of him doing his rear poses, and a lot needs to happen. And some of these other guys are improving. So, and if they bring him on at 11 o'clock at night again, Samson Dowd is going to struggle. He's just that. So Samson, I mean, look, these 5 guys are really close. You can throw a blanket on them, but Samson could be 5th. Then in 4th, I think who's made massive improvements in size, probably about 20 pounds heavier, but still looks super aesthetic, I think, is Andrew Jack Chinadu. So I think Andrew Jack might jump into fourth, bump himself up a bit. He looked incredible at the Texas Pro, rocked that in. And I mean, we called it, didn't we, a few weeks ago? We noticed the outrageous improvement to his delts and the size of the man, but he's maintained his aesthetics. He needs to bring in the seal skin on the back though. So he needs to get more condition. In fact, if Andrew can get more conditioned in the back and in the glutes, he could jump into second or third, honestly. So it's that close. I do believe Nick Walker's got an advantage, even though he doesn't have the aesthetics. He's got an advantage as he maintains his condition late to the evening. And last year, if he'd have got up there, there was a few people that thinking that he might have even stole the show. But Nick Walker, very heavily muscled man, knows how to pose. Okay, aesthetics aren't that good, but he's improved the outer sweeps of his quads. He might just jump into third. I do believe that Derek Lunsford may drop to second, even though he's probably improving, year after year. But what Hardy Schupan did at the Arnold's in bringing that waist in with training his transverse abdominis with the vacuums, that was massive. The difference in Hardy's waist from last year's Mr. Olympia to the Arnold was incredible. So if Hardy can try and do something about his watery back double biceps pose, I think he's going to win. So I think Hardy 1, Derek 2, Nick 3, Andrew 4, and Samson 5. But you could permutate those any which way, and I don't think people would be upset. So Andrew Jack could upset everyone if he can bring in the condition in the back and maintain the size. He's got to maintain that size. The judges asked him to put on size. Tyler Mannion did a wrap-up video of Texas and said that Andrew made ridiculous improvements in the whole year, and he took about the month off training. Andrew needed some time off, and by geez, did Andrew benefit from that time off. So that's a case in point. So it's going to be a cracker. Hunter Labrada is going to be knocking on the door of the top 5 for sure. And it's going to be a good battle. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I don't really have too much to add to it, but one thing that does pique my interest is whether Wesley Vissers can knock off C-Bum at the Classic this year, because the recent picks are looking very promising and very good. I mean, it's very hard to knock off the champ, but these days there's no such thing as a dynasty in bodybuilding anymore. C-Bum will probably be 5 and done, I think, with Wesley being the heir apparent. But does he have any chance of actually beating C-Bum at this year's Mr. Ray?
There's a slim chance. I know Sean Ray's called it that the incumbent champ is like 10 points ahead going into the show, but when you've already won a number of titles and you've been improving, Chris has been improving. He improved again last year, and he may be even better again. So if he's the same or if he's improved slightly, he's going to be very, very hard to beat. But there again, Wesley's improved massively. And that X-frame, that V-taper that he presented earlier in the year, I mean, we did a breakdown, didn't we? Do you remember we compared Chris and Wesley, and there's a case for Wesley winning, and there's a case for Wesley's physique being even more classic than Chris's. In fact, Wesley's posing is super classic. Wesley, some of his poses are brilliant. They're from right out the 1970s and 1980s classic textbook posing manual, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I'm not enthralled by anybody's posing in that division so much, but especially not C-Bums. Like, I just sort of think that C-Bum to me always just represents a scaled down bodybuilder. He doesn't look anything like Bob Paris I believe is probably more classic than, or even Keon Pearson probably looks a little bit more classic than C-Bum, because C-Bum has shitty arms at the end of the day. So
the only thing with the Wesley,
Olympia, you got to have fantastic looking Arnold peak biceps.
Yeah. So and Wesley's got those big arms, you see. So he's got that. But also we talk about structure. Chris has got the structure for classic where he beats those shorter guys like Terence Ruffin and Breon Ansley and all that sort of thing. Well, you see, the other thing about Wesley, he's got the structure too. He's a tall man. So he's the only guy that's got sort of that structure to match Chris. So he's, I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be, if he's, first or second. It'll be it'll be interesting to see if he can land second, Wesley. But it's going to be a stretch to see a win. But I think it's going to create a lot of interest. I mean, those at the show, I wish I was there this year. I would love to see that, unfold. That'd be brilliant. So
Yeah, well, like Hunter Labata argued before in the Haney Rambod, probably the reason why the classic physique division still isn't awarded a huge amount of money is because once C-Bum goes, there's not really another big name to really headline that division. Wesley Visser's okay, he's been around and he has a huge social media and YouTube presence, but again, it becomes like who's that guy once C-Bum retires, and they're going to need to find somebody that can carry that division in terms of its marketability and popularity.
That's right.
Because I think the open bodybuilders, because they're the only ones that a lot of the time, the popular conversation with the social media discussion. So these guys still get a lot of that kind of by word of mouth marketing.
That's right. Yeah. So it's going to be, it's going to be the crossroads for the division, I think. So maybe if they allow the weight cap to increase slightly, I don't know, making it a little bit more distant from men's physique, as Hunter alluded to with Haney. Could be something they need to look at.
And as Sean Ray says, and the next thing that we want to touch on very briefly, because we're completely out of time, is that he said directly from the Legends of Bodybuilding interview that he did with John Hansen this week, one of my favorite bodybuilding channels. Love John, love Sean, is that he wouldn't put a dollar bill on the reigning Mr. Olympia as a guarantee for victory. And I thought that was a very pertinent comment.
That's right.
As much as you hate and have distaste for Sean Ray, remember how I spoke about attack the message and not the mantra, and not the attack the message, but not the man.
Yep.
Is Sean Ray warming up to it, or do you still hate him as much as ever? Because I think that he's been
No. I said to you before a few podcasts ago that I always admired Sean's physique. He could walk the talk. He could pose brilliantly, and he really just did have an amazing physique that lasted for many years. He was top 5 for God knows how many years. But no, he makes a lot of good points, and he does speak very well. And I really enjoyed this interview with John Hansen, and Jerry Brainium didn't even get a look in really during the interview. But John does a sensational job with these Legends of Bodybuilding shows that really they need a lot more views. A lot of people need to be watching them. There's been some beauties over the years with Chris Dickerson.
What an archive he has of such documented history that will if people charge money for that archive, I would pay to subscribe to it because it's just brilliant.
Oh,
the thing I liked about Sean is that what somebody put in the comments, they summed up Sean's candor very perfectly. I thought Sean not only gives you an answer to your question, but he also gives you a pre-answer and a post-answer.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. And that's where kudos to Sean, honestly. He's a bodybuilding historian. He loves the sport, and a lot of his commentary is fair dinkum. It really is, and it's valid. It's just when he has got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder about he's got small man syndrome in the sport. We know that. I think that's clear. Probably, it's justifiable in some years. In '94, when Yates tore his bicep and Sean was really sensational, maybe there was an argument for Sean beating Dorian in '94. But
and he qualifies this argument as well. Just before we get into that, though, Craig, one of the things that really stood out to me in this interview that I didn't know was obviously the WBF at the time was trying to recruit the top bodybuilders, but I never knew that Sean actually got a offer for that one of their contracts. But I love how Sean turned them down because more than anything, Sean was one of those guys that was ahead of the curve back in the day for being so business minded and promoting himself and not just relying on a contract or an adoption certificate from Joe Weider to become the mega millionaire that he eventually became, because a lot of other guys like Kevin and Flex had to make those disastrous comebacks simply because of the finances weren't there. But I love how Sean ran the mathematics of the numbers in his head and saw that the big contract that the WBF were offering was not going to equal the potential of Sean Ray owning the marketing brand, which was Sean Ray. And I thought that was very prescient of Sean to do.
It was really interesting. It was really interesting. And Sean said that being a top 3 in the Mr. Olympia meant a lot business-wise, and he could really milk that. And Sean was doing lots of guest posing. He was doing lots of seminars and guest posings that back in the day, you could fetch a lot of dough from that stuff. and his pictures, is 8x12s or whatever they were, the signed pictures, they were fetching a fair bit of money too.
Yeah, and he would
So
lose all of that if he signed up with the WBF. And I also, another
that's
to
right.
that point, a counterpoint to that one as well is Dorian also made a similar decision. And both guys at the time, as both Sean and Dorian, didn't have a pot to piss in when in terms of their financials coming in, the money receiving from the sport, because they were still kind of new up and comers. They got
That's
this
right.
very valuable, kind of tempting contract offered by the WBF, but they didn't defect because
Mm,
they could see the bigger picture. And that shows and gives credit to their intelligence and prescience
yeah.
at the time. One thing that I didn't quite understand was if Bob Paris, who always had a fucking cry, but they didn't give me my placings because I wasn't gay. Fuck off,
Yeah.
Bob. You're a fucking ninja. And you use it as a platform, like I said in my fucking video, to try to
Mm,
advance your own celebrity. And all the fuckwits that came out in the messages on that video saying Bob Paris was vilified because he was gay and fuck Uyghur. Okay, Bobby boy, why didn't you fucking defect then to the
mm,
WBF,
yeah.
given that chance and that opportunity, and would have been a huge fucking draw for that fucking division?
Mm,
Why didn't he
yeah.
leave? He didn't.
That's right. I'll tell you what, there's nothing better than a Sean Stone rant. I love it. Oh, that's worth chiming in for, if nothing else for this episode.
No, it
Yeah,
just
no,
gets
but
my goat sometimes.
no, I find it very hard to disagree with you. That's for sure.
Well,
But
the thing is, like, when I do the research for these videos that I present, I'm not like kind of doing them for clicks and eyeballs where I'm just attacking fucking the guys, because I love all of them and the contributions that they gave. I fucking love Robby Robinson. I love Sean Ray. I love fucking Dorian. But when what they say or do clashes against my own analytics of as kind of a historian, loved historian of the sport, I've got to call it out because nobody fucking else is. Everybody else is like, oh, can I lick your balls, Bob? But then they don't put any fucking counter evidence. It's the
I know.
fucking criticism that I receive, but no counter evidence. I always say to these cunts, make a fucking video where you take my points and decimate them one by one, and then maybe I'll listen to your stupid fucking comment, mate.
Well, what your moniker of your channel is, truth, news, and reviews. And so
Yeah, and I
there you
mean,
go.
truth is only what it is in light of the facts you have. And that's why I always sort of say, oh, Arnold's girlfriend said this, or Franco said this, or George Butler and Charles Gaines said this. And these dickheads in the comments, they chime in with like, oh, that didn't happen. That didn't happen.
Mm,
And I was like,
yeah.
well, so somehow you've got more of the inside track than what Arnold's girlfriend or fucking Franco Columbo or
Mm,
Joe Weider or Charles Gaines has. You know above them fucking what happened. Well,
mm,
give us your secrets, buddy boy. Fucking let us know. Pour it out
that's
in the
right.
video.
Yeah, I know.
It's never true.
Oh,
It just
there's
always.
yeah, well, that's right. And there's a lot of keyboard warriors, pencil neck keyboard warriors that love to troll, and and a lot of what they say is definitely not the truth. That's for sure. Yeah, but but going back to the interview though, honestly, that there was some really good snippets there. I liked the emergence of Sean Ray, the picture that he painted about himself, which he's very happy to do. But it was a very good picture. How his sights were set on Labrada. We talked about Lee Labrada in this episode, but his sights were set on Labrada. He knew that if he could beat Labrada, if he could jump into third or fourth, in Sean's words, he was in the conversation. And the way he talked about that gave me the chills. And I might have to just watch the interview again because I've been watching it in the car on the way to work, and I've absorbed it all, but I could sink my teeth into that one again because he did beat Labrada in '93. I think he jumped into third place, and didn't he get like fifth or something in '92? Was really butthurt about that with Labrada beating him. But what really hurt him in '93 was when Flex Wheeler beat him. That's right. Because didn't he beat? That's right. He was chasing Flex Wheeler and Lee Labrada. He took out Lee Labrada, and then he thought that he'd done enough to beat Flex in '93, but no, it's not to be because Flex was, even though he won the Arnold in '93, Flex Wheeler looked sensational. He didn't quite have the condition at the Olympia, but still beat Sean. And he Sean talks about that at length, and he's still hurting about that, isn't he?
Yeah, well, and this is where Sean's case in point that I really liked in this interview as well, because Dorian's defense of all of his victories was, well, if you take this on a points basis based over 7 poses, and then you put all of us through those 7 poses, here's why I win.
Mm.
Now, Dorian lays it out as a very kind of like mathematical formula,
Yep.
a calculus to his reasons why he won. Sean kind of stipulates, though, that it should be the bodybuilder with the least flaws. And I kind of agree with that concept. There has to be something a little bit more intangible than just the mathematics of poses. If you
Pose to
have a
pose.
guy with a torn bicep, a running tan, and a bloated stomach, I don't give a fuck if they win 6 out of 7 fucking poses. You're not fucking the best bodybuilder in the world. You're not Mr. Olympia. So therefore, in Sean's, saying that he should have bested Flex Wheeler in 93, okay, Sean could make the argument that he beat Flex in certain amount of poses, but Flex still looked fucking better than Sean.
That's right.
And I'm a Sean Ray fan.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and in fact, Sean did allude to the fact that Flex won that based on his genetics. He kept talking about Flex's genetics, which he gave kudos to, and no one can deny that. But it did come up in conversation again how Flex was a little bit lazy, he didn't like to train, would cheat on his diet, and even Dorian said it. In fact, Dorian's made it very clear that if Flex had had Dorian's work ethic, he could have won a number of Mr. Olympias for sure. Can you imagine? So
yeah, well, this is why I love the sport, because it's so multifaceted, and it's not just always a question of genetics or who puts in the hardest training. It's just the conglomeration of all the different variables and all the different factors, and the filtering of all those factors into one single day of so many minutes of presentation on stage that decides who is the fucking champion on the day. And that's what makes bodybuilding so interesting.
Oh,
just
definitely.
because we're really coming up on time, mate, but
That's all right.
and I need to go very soon. We're talking about the increasing amount of guys, and we recently lost Eugene Mission along with other people.
That was sad.
It just becomes a nameless blur after a while of the steady torrent. And I'm doing a video on this at the moment about the deaths in bodybuilding and the Deadpool that I hope to release pretty soon. But we get all the criticisms about like how bodybuilding is in this quandary of people just dying. But I like how Sean actually had answers for what they could do. So I like I said that change comes not from the death of bodybuilders, but by the lawsuits. So if people are going to start dragging the federations and these coaches through the courts with lawsuits, that's when people are going to start taking notice and maybe getting hit in the hip pocket, and things might change.
Yeah, I think so.
And yeah,
I just think some of
another thing as well is just that the federation, they should just require proof of health insurance, current health insurance, and proof of the physicals at the time that they do these competitions, rather than assuming the full responsibility for the athlete's health insurance, which we know is never going to happen.
Yeah, so that was touched on quite nicely in the interview with John, and Sean made great points there. But something needs to be done. And some of these protocols, the drug protocols, where they're taking, 7, 8, 9 different compounds. Insulin's one of the biggest problems for sure in terms of cardiovascular health. But, obviously in recent years, what we've seen is, we know with anabolics, the blood thickens. And then, of course, there was, we know what happened in the last few years, which was added on top of that. So that has been a perfect storm for cardiovascular events. So there is that spectre, but definitely, I think if there was more blood work done and a bit more responsibility placed on, the federation maybe for some blood work checks, some health checks, we could save some lives. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, in my research from this video, I came across this quote from Chad Nichols, who did the Real Bodybuilding podcast a number of years ago. And Chad has been soundly criticized by Sean over the years for being the doctor at the bodybuilding and putting so many of his athletes into a grave or into some kind of health jeopardy. And he was relaying that a bodybuilding client's friend once him, Chad Nichols, because he was worried about the athlete. This guy was training for the Olympia and he was sick, and he asked if he should take him to the hospital. And Chad replied, quote, "No, you shouldn't take him to the fucking hospital. this is what he's supposed to feel like. At the lowest
Mm,
point, you should feel like you're dying, like you
mm,
feel like your body is just shutting down. And I just sort of thought, this is the guys behind the fucking problem. These
mm.
fucking gurus
I don't know.
who are
I know.
convincing guys that instead of feeling like most athletes do when they're competing, which is their peak of health and fitness, but you
Mm,
should be this fragile, broken down, fucking miserable state
mm,
just to prove that you're hardcore, going back to
mm,
like the Labrada illusions at the beginning of, our
yeah,
discussion.
that's right.
But Sean Ray
Uh,
says, if he was a parent and he saw his son had died, he's going to drag that person through the fucking mud until
mm,
he gets
mm.
like a financial revenge, at least for that person's malfeasance, basically.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, some of the things that Sean calls out are worthy of being called out. So again, kudos to Sean there. And I've got no beef with Sean in that regard, and good on him, you know. But Eddie Abu, who keeps saying, wake the fuck up, he's with his, and he's got a carnivore diet now, and he's basically almost cured himself of all his ailments. But he talks about some of the things he did as a professional bodybuilder. And the main thing that he talks about, aside from performance enhancing drugs, was insulin. Insulin was the one that was so dangerous. He was having hyperglycemic reactions several times a day. And this went on for years. And his wife saved him a number of times. And so, I think that's something that people need to sort of, like he says, wake the fuck up and take on board. So I think that the minimalist approach to drug use from back in the 70s and 80s was the way to go. The guys look fantastic. They still look like cartoon characters, and their waistlines were in check, but at least they
The sad
didn't
thing is,
have
Craig,
all
we're
the
never
health
going to see
problems.
the change. That's basically
No,
the moral of the story of the video that I'm going to be releasing, is that we can talk all this shit about how we love the physiques from yesteryear. We're now on a collision crash course with destiny that eventually we're just going to literally have, some 300-pound fucking bull mastiff collapse on stage and die in front of everybody. And then they will drag him off by his heels like they did with Paul Gillette that time that he froze up on stage.
yeah,
The
how he
curtain will
didn't
close
die
for a
as
little
well.
bit, and then it'll raise up, halftime entertainment, and then it'll be forgotten about 20 minutes later because people have moved on to the next thing on their phones. And this will just keep going around and around in circles, and more people were dying.
So yeah, the phrase Deadpool. In fact, I went and saw the Deadpool movie just recently, but this is a whole different sort of ball game. So I'm looking forward to one of your classic videos that you put up on Sean Stone's Deadpool. It's going to be
Yeah, well, maybe
it's going to be worth
with
watching.
every dead athlete, we can have a picture of their corpse on social media, and we could kind of use the Milos tag, hashtag bodybuilding, hashtag this is bodybuilding, because this is what hashtag this is bodybuilding is for this current crop of competitors. And they are fucking playing Russian roulette with them. And
The funny thing
uh,
about Milos is, he loves the classic physiques and, the small waist and this is bodybuilding, hashtag bodybuilding, all the rest. But he was known for his Olympia cycle. He was a bit of a guru when it came to the chemistry. And that Olympia cycle was massive and not particularly great for your health. So,
when he's almost
yeah,
died because of the fentanyl injections into the arm, remember he was
I know.
on
So
that win askew?
he's as much as I like Milos, he's a little bit hypocritical there.
Very,
Interesting.
yeah. And that's why another, bedrock or pillar that this whole sport is built on is the hypocrisy, because people say one thing and then support it either unconsciously or complicitly with their eyeballs and their dollars. So we're never going to get systemic change by any means. All the introduction of all these other divisions, they also all basically lead to the same place, which is increased weight limits and bigger and more conditioned bodybuilders, which is never a recipe for health. But that's what we want to see. We want to see the freaks.
Yeah, well, I like the freaks too, but at least some of these freaks, at least some of them are getting blood work done anyway. So that we're starting to see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, but John Meadows had great blood work as well. Was always keeping an eye on his blood work and his health, and he was going, "Oh, I felt fantastic." And next minute,
I know. Yeah, true. That was sad, wasn't it, when he passed? He had quite a few problems leading into his death, but he looked like he was sort of getting on top of them. But it was a shame.
you
All
got to
right,
know
yeah,
when
John.
you're I think with the sports, and
Yep.
when you're as many health problems of that, you're still fronting up to the gym and doing your social media videos like John did.
mm,
still doing all the practices that got him to that place in the first place. Yeah,
mm,
well,
mm.
it's choices and consequences at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's no do-overs once you're bench pressing 6 foot of dirt off your chest in the dark. Uh,
Yeah, that's true.
We're going to leave you there, Craig. We
No
will
worries.
touch on some other topics later, and always a fantastic discussion with your love that we've picked it back up again. So
Oh,
hopefully
same
we can
here.
make this some semblance of regularity going forward. And I love touching on
Oh,
these
definitely.
topics.
Oh, no, definitely. I'm always keen, and thanks for having me on, and yeah, look forward to our next chat.
Great talking to you, mate. Have a great week.
Yeah, good on you. See ya.